revealed the shocking details of what happens to serial k.illers after they d.ie. There is no ceremony, music, flowers or kind words after most serial killer funerals, but what happens to them when they finally die? In several cases, the brains of serial killers are being stored so they can be scientifically examined to determine a neurological link to their violent behavior. But in other cases, serial killers make startling final requests that are granted and others are supported by fans. Charles Manson is one of the most notorious figures of the 1960s and is synonymous with the dark side of the hippie movement. Although he did not carry out any killing himself, he led a cult known as the Manson family and convinced middle-class kids to carry out some of the most brutal murders ever committed. In the summer of 1969, he directed his mostly young, female followers to murder 7 people in what prosecutors said was part of a plan to incite a race war. Among the victims was actress Sharon Tate, the pregnant wife of filmmaker Roman Polanski. She was stabbed 16 times by cult members. In court, Manson said, "These children that come at you with knives, they are your children. You taught them, I didn't teach them. I just tried to help them stand up." The murders he ordered saw a group of his young followers break into Ms. Tate's home and stab to death her, coffee heiress Abigail Folger, celebrity hairdresser Jay Sebring, Polish movie director Wojciech Frykowski and Stephen Parent, a friend of the estate's caretaker. Ms. Tate was 8.5 months pregnant and her husband, filmmaker Roman Polanski, was out of the country at the time. The next night, a wealthy grocer and his wife, Lino and Rosemary LaBianca, were stabbed to death in their home. The words "pigs" and "helter skelter" were written on the wall in blood at the crime scenes. Manson claimed he got the idea for the murderers from the Beatles' song Helter Skelter, which he believed to be a coded message from the band. Manson died this year on November 19 at age 83 and was serving a life term. He spent 45 years in prison for orchestrating the killings. Friends and supporters of the notorious criminal set up a donations page on the crowdfunding website, GoFundMe, to ensure his remains are laid to rest with the honor, respect and dignity he deserves. But the page was shut down by the fundraising site within a matter of hours. There is now widespread speculation about what will happen to Manson's body. Californian law says an inmate must annually identify his or her next of kin on notification in case of inmate death form. The Department of Corrections will attempt to notify the listed individuals who are then given 10 days to claim the body. It is not clear if Manson had nominated Jason Freeman, his last remaining relative. Mr. Freeman said, "If we can't raise money with GoFundMe, we'll find another way. It will definitely be a group effort. It's not just one person. It's a lot of people holding hands." There is currently a dispute about 2 wills which were allegedly signed by Manson, although a high-profile attorney said he has serious doubts over the viability of the second as it was not signed with a swastika like in the first one. Ted Bundy. There was no public funeral for Ted Bundy after he was executed in 1989 for multiple murders. He confessed to more than 30 killings and requested his ashes be scattered in the Cascade Mountains in Washington state, where at least 4 of his victims' bodies were discovered. Despite having 3 death sentences in 2 separate trials, Bundy got his dying wish after his execution. Ian Brady, known as one of the Moores murders, along with his girlfriend Myra Hindley, he tortured and murdered 5 children in the 1960s. They buried their young victims on Saddleworth Moor, but the remains of 12-year-old Keith Bennett have never been found. Brady died of cancer in May, but his burial was held off over fears his ashes would be scattered across the moors where his victims were buried. Brady's body was collected from the mortuary at the Royal Liverpool Hospital and escorted by an unmarked police car with an inspector and sergeant from Merseyside Police to Southport Crematorium. His body was cremated in presence of Brady's solicitor, Robin Mackin, the police officers, council officials and 2 crematorium workers at 10 p.m. before being placed into a biodegradable urn made of Himalayan rock salt. The weighted urn was designed to sink to the bottom of the sea immediately before dissolving over a few hours. Ian Brady had requested the 5th movement of Hector Berlioz's Symphonie Fantastique be played during the ceremony. The piece envisages a satanic orgy where monsters gather to laugh at a burial. In accordance with a judge's order, no music was played, there were no flowers and no photographs were taken. John Wayne Gacy Jr., the notorious killer and clown, said, "Clowns can get away with murder." The American serial killer and rapist sexually assaulted and murdered at least 33 teenage boys and young men before being imprisoned in the 1970s. He was Pogo the Clown, who attended parties and visited sick kids in hospitals. But behind the facade, he was led a double life and buried 28 bodies under the floor in his Chicago home, buried another one under his driveway, and dumped 4 more in a nearby river. While behind bars, he painted several pictures, including one of Pogo the Clown and another of a skull wearing a clown's hat. After being executed by lethal injection in 1994, his body was cremated and the ashes given to his family, but they kept his brain intact. His brain was given to psychiatrist Helen Morrison to study, who reportedly kept it in a sealed bag in her basement. Jeffrey Dahmer. Serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer admitted killing 17 young men and boys. He mutilated them and sometimes cannibalized his victims. Police found body parts in his Milwaukee apartment in 1991. He was serving 15 life terms in prison until he was beaten to death by another inmate, Christopher J. Scarver. Christopher J. Scarver killed him and another murder with an iron bar after being left unsupervised. Apparently, Scarver claims Dahmer had no remorse and would frequently taunt other inmates by making severed limbs with food and then dripping tomato ketchup over as blood. Dahmer's remains were cremated in 1995, but his brain was preserved while his parents argued about whether to give it to scientists for study. His brain was held in formaldehyde at the request of his mother, who wanted scientists to discover if biological factors influenced his actions. His father wanted him to be cremated as per his son's wish. His mother, Joyce Flynn, told the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, "Jeff always said that, if he could be of any help, he wanted to do whatever he could."